And welcome into Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network, also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialist. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John's. He is Denny Thompson. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green, and the good folks at George Moore Chevrolet bring you Gator Bytes.
Let me tell you how big of a Gator fan Justin Moore is. He was the general manager there. Last year, we did this college football pick'em there, where I would go and we'd take employees, right, and they'd pick against Justin. Justin's such a big Gator fan that he's one of these guys that refuses to pick them to win. They just will not pick them to win.
He's going to get a lot of games right this year, then.
Right, because he's just emotionally so invested in. But good Gator people, man, y'all get out there, see Justin Moore at George Moore Chevrolet. Buy some trucks, buy some cars, do whatever it is you need to do, or just have your car serviced. Either way.
I'll continue to say it till I'm told otherwise. Need I say more?
I'm not going to tell you otherwise.
At George Moore Chevrolet. All right. Last week, that was bad. Let's dive right in. Let's review Lexington, because hopefully tomorrow won't be a game in the fourth quarter. Homecoming against Vanderbilt, although Vanderbilt did beat Florida last year. Rewind the clock back to Saturday, Denny. I'm locked in, sitting down, fired up, me and the 4-year-old watching the Florida-Kentucky game. And it was very apparent, very quick, it was going to be a long day at the office for the Florida Gators. And when they got a personal foul leaping penalty on a punt return, and then the very next play, Kentucky goes 70 yards for a score, you might as well just turn off the game at that point.
Yeah.
It was over at that point.
It's so infuriating. I don't even care that much, and it's infuriating because you watch them, and then they make you feel like you don't know football.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing, because you watch them against Tennessee, and you watch them against all these, I guess I say all these other teams, but the 3 games that they won, and it's like, okay, the one thing that we know for sure about Florida is their defensive front is improved, and they are more physical, and then they play Kentucky, and it's like, no, it's not. It's every single game that they lose has you scratching your head, not because they lost, but because of the ways that they lose, and it just like sets your confidence back in what they're doing to the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
Like the things that last week we thought were solid on this football team. Are they?
The defense, and the luster's off of the defense. And look, I mean, the offense didn't do them a lot of favors. Special teams didn't do them a lot of favors, but I'm sorry. We always talk about talent, right? Florida's got more talent than a team like Kentucky. Well, no, they don't. This is 3 years in a row Kentucky has beaten Florida. They've beat them up the last couple of years. Florida could not stop them on Saturday. It is the first time since Bear Bryant was the coach in Lexington that Kentucky's won 3 in a row. But that's the reality right now for the Florida football program. They are not as good a program right now as the Kentucky Wildcats.
Do y'all watch Kentucky when they're not playing Florida?
I mean, I've seen bits, and I watched them against Vanderbilt. Yeah,
I don't. I have no reason to watch Kentucky.
I'm weird. I watch a lot of SEC football.
I have no reason, but I will say this. Because I only watch them when they play Florida, they look like the best team in the country every single year. They look like the most physical team in the country every single year. And then all of a sudden you look up and they lose 4 or 5 games. What is going on with this Kentucky-Florida thing? What is Mark Stoops doing Florida week?
They won't
keep doing it.
Well, they won't lose 4 or 5 games this year. This is a good Kentucky team.
How can we say that every year?
Yeah, but they're already 5-0.
They've played nobody outside of Florida. Every single year they play Florida, and you're like, this is Kentucky's year. They got a 10-win team, and then you look up and Vanderbilt takes them to the brink, or you look up and like Georgia's about to put a 40 burger on them or something. I just don't understand the matchup issue. And that's why last week I thought, okay, good front seven with a little bit of depth and some size. That means you match up well against the run game, right? Isn't that what we assume? No.
Well, let me ask you this, all right? There is not a lot of silver lining from last week's game, but the one thing, man, Florida's so young. I look at that depth chart every week. They had 1 senior in the starting 22 last week. I mean, they're learning on the fly. The young Gator D-line got taken to school last week. You hope it's a learning experience, but they are playing so many freshmen and sophomores. really on both sides of the ball, but particularly on defense.
I'm not in the mood for this.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, look, we're doing a Gator podcast, so I'm trying to do a little positivity. It was a terrible day last week.
Listen,
they are playing a lot of young guys.
They are young, and if you're on the fire Billy Napier train, then we're not on the same train. So let me just get that out of the way now. I'm talking about things that I see the week before. I'm talking about things that I see against Tennessee. I'm talking about things that they know how to do, that they can functionally do.
But isn't that like the home road thing, right? They're a better team at home.
There's something about that too. Like, I mean, this is. Here's my frustration. I'm just going to put it out there, and I'll just be very black and white with it. We're seeing the same crap over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And there's no other place to go than coaching with that. There isn't. Like, if you cannot lose this many games on the road, what are you doing differently? Maybe they are doing something differently. Maybe they have a committee with their 60 coaches to look into what we're doing on road trips that's not effective. Why can't we get 11 people on a football field? Why don't we have a special teams coordinator at this point? Because it's obvious, like, whatever we're doing here is not working, right? So, I mean, take the youth out. Like, if you've got a young football team, shouldn't you have a special teams coordinator?
No, you should. And
if you've got a young football team, shouldn't you be able to travel? And wouldn't it be easier to travel in some way? Like, I know when I get comfortable with something, like, I take a little bit more latitude with it, right? Like, okay, there's more freedom. Man, when I first do something, you tell me that curfew's at 9, I'm gonna be in at 9, right? These guys don't know. Do you need to leave earlier the day? I don't know. I have no idea. There's a million things that go on, and I'm just kind of reaching from the top of my head here. But things have got to change. Things have got to look differently, man.
I defend Billy Napier until I'm blue in the face every night on 1010XL because it's 18 games. I understand he's 9-9. You got to minimum give him 3 years on the field. And for any Gator fan, and what I love is, I love this. People say, no, I get it. I still want him gone, but I get it. Well, then you don't get it. If you want to fire Billy Napier right now, you do not get it. Don't come with me and saying, well, I get it. It's only 18 games, but this, that, and the other. No, if you want any inkling of letting Billy Napier go before the 3-year mark, then you, quote, don't get it, at least in my opinion.
You can't fire him.
Right. Having said all that, you have 2 guys wearing number 3 on the field at Utah. That's embarrassing. 15-yard penalty. Utah scores because of it. You think you've corrected that until you get to Lexington, 3 and out. You're going to get the ball in great field position. You're only down 10-0. Here we go. And then leaping on special teams, and that's another 15-yard penalty. And then a play later, Kentucky's in the end zone, 70 yards, the game's over.
Wasn't there a point that Florida had 13 players on the field?
And they still didn't stop them out the goal line.
How is this happening?
Yeah. No, I agree.
That's and I get the youth movement, and again, I know I sound like I'm crushing Napier. I kind of am, but I in no way want him gone. There's not even a little bit.
You can crush him without saying you want him fired. That's a pet peeve of mine.
That's
I can't
correct.
Stand that.
Exactly. Like, you can be critical, but also be reasonable, right? And it is. We're talking about a very difficult job because your fate is resting on the shoulders of 18 and 19, in his case, 18 and 19-year-old young men. Right. But at the same time, man, like, they can count to 11. Right. You've got all these resources and we're making these little critical errors. And that's not why they're losing games. They're losing games because they can't tackle and they can't execute. You have to do that in football, and they're not doing that.
Well, one thing, too, and again, I know we're talking to Gator fans here doing a Gator podcast. They don't live in reality, a lot of them. They see the logo, right? They see the orange and blue and the Gator, written on the helmet, and they think that it's the University of Florida. You're not a top half program in the SEC right now. You're not. If you do a schoolyard pick'em of the 14 current SEC football programs, where is Florida going?
Okay, but hold
7,
on.
8, 9, and that's at the highest.
Hold on. Because I got a question for you.
Yes.
Take your same schoolyard pick'em and just put them all as players. Florida's players are getting picked pretty high up. If you said, hey, we're going to take all the players in the SEC,
okay,
and we're going to pick our teams. We're going to draft our teams from current SEC players. I promise you there's a lot of Florida players that get picked before Kentucky. I promise you there's a lot of Florida players that get picked before South Carolina and Vanderbilt. And there's probably more Florida players that get picked than, I don't know, teams that are doing better than them.
Give me some Florida players that go pretty high then.
I think Trevor Etienne. I think Trevor Etienne.
I mean, he's getting 10 carries a game for some reason.
Right. That's my point. Like, I think what Gator fans, because I'm going to defend them for just a second, they do see the logo, and there are expectations, and that's okay. You should not be losing to Kentucky. You are. There's nothing we can do about it now, to your point. Like, you're not a top half team, but you should be.
Well, Kentucky's better than Florida.
And why? How?
Well,
Why?
I mean, I think Mark Stoops has done a great job there. Obviously, they're doing the transfer portal thing much better than the Gators. There are reasons to that.
Are they?
But there is no argument on planet Earth that you can tell me that Florida has better talent than Kentucky when Kentucky's beaten them 3 years in a row.
Oh, no, there's something going on there. I can tell you that Florida's got better talent. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't think it's an absurd argument. But there's something going on. They can't beat them. Right, but I don't know. When was the last? Has Florida ever finished behind Kentucky in recruiting? Ever? Probably not. Probably not. Right.
But again, that's the whole star system, and you and I have had that talk.
I love it. The star system to me is very accurate.
Well, I mean, maybe it is, but if it's very accurate, and Florida is continuously getting higher star caliber players than Kentucky. Yet Kentucky's wiping the floor with them 3 years in a row. So then you are blaming it on coaching.
There's something going like this. We just saw this, and I hate to keep bringing them up, but it's the parallel that we've got. We just saw this with FSU. We just saw this at the end of Jimbo's tenure, during Taggart's tenure, at the very first part of Norvell's tenure. The culture just sucked for whatever reason. They changed coaches. They did whatever. I don't know what it is. I'm not smart enough to know, but it just wasn't a winning culture. That's what this feels like, because every year looks the same to me, right? We talk about year after year after year, man, they can't get lined up on defense. It's almost like Florida basketball reincarnated.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know what's going on there, and I don't believe his coaching, and I don't believe his talent, but it's something. There's something happening because they're not playing to the level of their talent. And, oh, by the way, like, what are we doing offensively? If Graham Mertz has passed everything that you've given him to this point, which would we agree that Graham Mertz has handled this year pretty dang well for what they've asked him to do?
Mm-hmm.
Give him more. Give him more. If I am doing something, if I work for you, Hack, and you give me a task, and I do well on that task over and over and over again, I expect you to challenge me and give me a harder task. Put more responsibility on my shoulders. When's that going to happen?
Well, Mertz is not going to last the season at this point with how bad that offensive line is in pass blocking. I mean, he's getting killed out there every play. So I don't know how much more you can put on his plate because he's running.
Roll him out.
Well,
roll him out somewhere other than right. Roll him out.
Yeah, somewhere other than right. Yeah.
Right. Like I mean, let's get creative with this thing. And y'all, I promise you, like I know Billy. He's an awesome guy, and he's super organized, and he is the right guy long term. It's just, man, let's let go. What do you got to lose right now?
Nothing.
What do you have to lose in going, hey, you know what? Like it or not, the University of Florida is an offensive school.
Yeah.
It is what it is. The fans want offense. The players in Florida are offensive players. They're exciting players in high school. Let them go.
But it's just, and I told you this before we started, it's the mindset. And it's weird, right? Because I'm now an objective broadcast journalist, right? But I was in that Gator.
You consider yourself objective?
I do, actually, much more now than maybe I used to be. Okay. You knew me when I was younger, when I wasn't. You've known me for a long time. 10, 15 years ago, I was in the midst of Gator Nation. I was going down to the south end zone at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, immersed in it. So I understand, Gator fans and their fandom. My family's had season tickets as long as I've been alive. Having said all that, I also can see it now from the outside, and I understand why opposing fan bases feel the way they do about the Gator fan base. I'm talking to a Gator buddy of mine earlier this week, and he's like, well, we're going to beat Vanderbilt, and we're going to beat South Carolina, we're going to be 5-2 going into the bye. And I'm sitting there saying, on what planet is Florida going to go into Williams-Brice Stadium next week at 3:30 in the afternoon and beat Spencer Rattler in South Carolina on the road. You don't live in reality. Florida's not going to Columbia, South Carolina and winning that game next week. No way, shape, or form. And if they beat Vanderbilt, I'll be happy at this point. It's just,
I think both things are right. Like, I can see both sides. You're right. Like, the logic tells you it's not going to happen, but then you can't get away from what I was saying earlier. Like that.
No, but I can, though. I don't think Florida has better players than Kentucky.
But you shouldn't get away from that, is my point. Like, those are expectations. What do you mean you don't think Florida has better players? Or is what you're really saying is they're not developing the players when they get there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you have better players, one would think you shouldn't lose to them 3 years in a row. That's where I'm at. Maybe that's too simplistic. But if you have better players, you're allowing 280 yards rushing. Obviously, the Kentucky offensive line was better than your defensive line last week.
I think you're explaining perfectly the frustrations, because all these things can be right. Like, all these things of, man, we stink and we don't have better players, but then the very next sentence you can go, but wait a second, now we're in the University of Florida and we recruited higher than all these guys. So are we not developing our players? Are we not putting our players in the right position to perform? Like, what is happening? And I hate the culture word because teams that win have good cultures. Like, if you want to have good culture, win, right? Yeah. But there's something there. And I can't put my finger on it, but I know I'll watch on Saturdays, and I know I'll watch them destroy Tennessee in a game that had me believing that they were going to be one-loss Florida against undefeated Georgia, probably a top 10 matchup if that were to happen in Jacksonville. And then 2 weeks later, this team may not win another game the rest of the year.
Well, you said it perfectly earlier in the year. It's a week-to-week team.
No doubt.
You know, and when they beat Tennessee, now granted, I think you would even admit, I've admitted this, Tennessee was bad. Now, were they bad because Florida made them bad in that game? Probably. But Joe Milton played awful. Tennessee made stupid penalties. I mean, how many penalties was Tennessee called on?
It's not the same Tennessee team as last year.
Right.
It's not even close.
All right, so I want to get to Billy Napier in a second. Southeast Orthopedic Specialist brings you Gator Bytes. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can log on to their website by going to se-ortho.com, and you can listen for Southeast Orthopedic Specialist, the good Dr. Kevin Murphy, on Thursday mornings in the 7 o'clock hour with Jeff and Dan right here on 1010XL for his weekly analysis of injuries in sports. Also, your friends there at George Moore Chevrolet.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know what else I can say about George. They're at Atlantic Boulevard. Y'all go buy a car.
That's simple and to the point.
Or get an oil change or something. I don't know, but they're good people.
They are very good. Okay. Billy Napier's a good person. I like Billy Napier. The conversations I've had with him, I really enjoy talking football with him. I think he's doing a good job on the recruiting trail. Keep in mind, although they got boat raced in Lexington, no decommitments yet. That top 5 class is holding strong for now at 3-2 on the year. What's next for Billy? I mean, you know, the word stubborn has come up a little bit. Offensive play calling, people don't like that. You mentioned the special teams gaffes. Is there a stubborn element to Billy Napier and he needs to kind of back away and let some other people have more control?
I don't know. I mean, I think I don't know what you call it. I think it's a guy who's been highly successful is what he's done, and he believes in himself, which is what you want. And you don't really make these changes, during the season. I mean, that's the truth. If you separate the recruiting from the performance for a second, though, because while I'm not overly involved in recruiting, couldn't tell you anybody's name, don't know anything about these kids, I do have a fair amount of guys that run through our facility, and they are very excited about Florida as a whole. Like, Florida is a topic of conversation for elite high school players. They still are. Like, that's a thing. So they're doing a unbelievable job. Cinderella story type job, really, when you think about it on the recruiting trail. But on this performance side of things, like I think it's just like anything else. Like, I think all of us do the same exact thing. It's we do something successfully and then we take it up a notch or another level. And you realize, okay, I got to keep my base about me, but now I got to do a little bit more. I got to make this change. I got to grow as a person. I got to do this. And I just think Napier is going to figure that out. And when he does, there's not a guy in the country that's more organized. There's not a guy in the country that's more convicted. There's not a guy in the country, by the way, that I know that does a better job of just being with his players. Like, he is there, their whole staff. They have tailored an entire situation for their players' well-being, not just on the field, but off the field, right? These are things that matter. These are 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old guys. Like, this stuff matters. So you should be pulling for this guy if you're a Gator fan, because he is doing very good things for these athletes at the University of Florida. But make no mistake about it, you don't get paid to be a nice guy. Mm-hmm. And the cruel reality of this world is you don't get paid to be nice things and develop guys off the field. That's not what this gig is. You got to win. You got to generate revenue. You got to generate money. And so I think he knows that. And I think you probably go into the offseason and he does some self-evaluation. And I wouldn't call it stubborn. It's, hey, man, this has worked for him in the past. He's pushed the right buttons in the past. He's the coach of the University of Florida, which makes him an elite individual. He's been very successful, right? Sometimes when you're successful, man, you're gonna have to prove it to me that it don't work. I'm gonna believe in myself until I can't anymore.
Well, and the reality of the situation too, and again, I mean, Florida has had 6 head coaches in 20 years. You're averaging less than 3.5 years per head coach. The bed has been made. The hay is in the barn. They do not tolerate, they being Gator boosters, Gator alums, the Gator fan base, Gator Nation, whatever you want to call it, the noise in the system. If you do not win after 3 years, you are gone. That has been proven time and time again. Now, I think they're maybe lying in the bed that they made now, because 6 head coaches in 20 years, I believe, has caught up with Florida to an extent. When you look at Mark Stoops and what he's built in 11 years at Kentucky, you look at Mike Norvell in year 4 at Florida State and doing what he's doing, and Florida's turning over coaches every 2 or 3 years, seemingly. This is the result of that, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these guys are human beings, and so when they're weighing the options, not even just what you're seeing on the field now, but to circle back around to why you can't get rid of any coach right now. There's so many different reasons. One, McGarity was telling me yesterday that's a $50 million thing, because you then have to fire assistants and strength coaches. You have to rebrand things. Like, it is a very, very expensive thing. But bigger than that is the next coach that you hire. Like, these guys are humans. They're looking for quality of life. They're going to look at your job, and if you want them, I'm assuming a lot of people want them, and they're going to go, well, wait a second, down in Gainesville, like, they're giving people 2.5 years.
Yeah.
I'm not going there. Like, I'm not bringing my offensive coordinator whose family relies on me and my defense coordinator whose family. I'm not doing that. I'm going to go somewhere else, maybe make $500,000, $1 million less, but know that I got 4 years to do.
See, but that kind of goes back to my point, right? I mean, first off, we're living in la-la land, because this is never going to happen. But in a hypothetical scenario, I had people telling me, well, go get Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin wouldn't leave Oxford, Mississippi for Gainesville. Sorry. Are you kidding me?
I literally just choked when you said that.
I don't think Florida's a better job than Ole Miss right now.
The only way that somebody would do something like that, you can win a national championship at Florida much easier than you can at Ole Miss. That would have to be the strongest driver in your life, right? That would have to be your whole reason for coaching. And y'all, I got bad news. Most of them, it's not. Most of them, it's just like all of us. They want to make some money. They want to spend some time with their family, right? You would have to say, yes, I'm going to take this quality of life. I'm going to throw it down the drain, because at the University of Florida, I'm either going to win a natty or I'm going to be fired in 3 years.
Yeah, and everybody's got...
It ain't happening.
Everybody's got money. Everybody's got facilities and
Lane's
recruiting
making,
budgets.
What, $7.5 million at Ole Miss?
You would not get a guy like Lane Kiffin. And again, right now, if you're doing that schoolyard pick'em, Ole Miss is getting picked before Florida as far as football programs in the SEC.
No doubt. No, there's zero doubt. That's again, like you said, we're kind of making each other's points. Like, you don't go and get a Lane Kiffin when you fired 3 coaches in the last 7 years.
No, but that's where Gator fans are still at, and I don't know why they feel that way, or why they think that's even a scenario. Billy Napier.
I'll tell you why. Because they hit the lottery with Spurrier and Urban Meyer. Like, I get it. And if you're our age, like, you remember that like it was yesterday. And so you try to recreate that over and over and over again. Like, I completely get it. I just also know we are in a different time of college football right now. There's not a massive difference between the job at Florida and the job at Arkansas. Not pay-wise, not quality of life-wise, not anything, right? And now with the transfer portal, You may not get them the first time around, but you can get talent the second time around at any of these places. Look what Deion's doing, right? And we look what Norvell did. Like, it's over and over and over again. So I just think we're in a different era. I think probably the best thing we can do as Gator fans is quit talking about it.
Yeah.
Because it's not happening. Now, if they get waxed by Vandy, it's still not happening. But he's going to be forced to make some changes.
If they lose tomorrow, yeah, well, look, if that'd be 2 in a row to Vandy. I don't live in a world where Vandy comes into Florida on homecoming and wins, and hopefully that world doesn't exist, because if that world does exist, we have a very interesting Gator Bytes next week. You are in the inner circle, if you will, with what you do at 6 Points quarterback training. You know people in Tallahassee. You know people in Gainesville. I have repeatedly made the argument of Mike Norvell, where he was 2 years ago to where he is now. Is that a good comparison? Can Billy Napier in Florida be in 2025 where Mike Norvell and Florida State are now in 2023?
No.
Why?
No, not you. Oh, in 25.
In 25.
Oh, yeah.
Because Norvell in 21 was on the hot seat. They just lost to Jacksonville State.
I thought you were asking for it next year.
No.
Okay. Yes, absolutely.
And it took Norvell 2 years to get from the loss to Jacksonville State to now they're in the top 5 in America.
Yeah.
In 2025, is that doable for Billy Napier? Are the situations comparable?
Yep. You find a quarterback like they did, right? And then your guys just stay believing in your core beliefs. That's all that happened at FSU. Is they found a quarterback, they hit on some guys in some portals in the portal because their advanced scouting is very good at FSU.
Oh, he's the king of the portal.
Right. They do an amazing job of finding these guys, right? And then getting them. But at the very root of it is he got all of his players that he recruited or brought in who believed in what he was selling and knew that he wanted them, not the previous coach, but that Mike and his staff wanted him. And he got all of them to believe in what they were selling. Mm-hmm. And regardless of the outcome, we're still going to believe. We're still going to go. We're still going to get better every day. This thing is not a failure till we all quit. Like, let's go. And then he kept most of his coaches on staff. And a lot of the promotions he made from within. Kenny Dillingham leaves. He promotes basically an assistant quarterback coach to a very good job. Pays off big time. It's got him a superstar, Tony Tokars. Those things can happen in Florida. And those two individuals are very, very similar. So I think it is. There's a lot of examples on why you should hit eject early, but then there are also a lot of examples on why you shouldn't, right? And I think the Mike Norvell situation scenarios are very similar to what Florida has. Just kind of bad culture that just takes a little bit of time to root out.
That's the blueprint.
Not bad kids. Let's make sure we're clear on that.
Yeah.
These are just bad culture.
That's the blueprint that Florida needs to follow, no question. All right, let's get into this week's games. Before we do that, Southeast Orthopedic Specialist brings you Gator Bytes. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John. So again, thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialist and to George Moore Chevrolet for bringing you this week's edition of Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network. We will save Vandy and Florida for a moment. Missouri, maybe one of the quietest 5-0 teams in America. LSU goes to Missouri tomorrow. LSU, where are they at after that loss to Ole Miss last week? Could Missouri go to 6-0 if they beat LSU? What's your thought there?
LSU can't stop anybody. Missouri's quarterback's playing really well. His name escaped me all of a sudden.
It's Cook, right?
Watch some stuff on him. Yeah. I watched some stuff on him the other day. He's playing really well, making good decisions. Seems like he's an accurate thrower. I haven't watched a full game of him. But, I mean, Jaden Daniels may be the best player in the country, not named Caleb Williams. Mm-hmm. Like, this guy is unstoppable. Right? So if LSU can get anything going defensively.
Their defense is awful.
If they can get anything, like, that's a hard team to beat. The receivers are unbelievable. Like, it's – so I don't think they lose at Missouri. I think Missouri takes their first loss, but I also think that you come out of that watching that game realizing Missouri's a pretty dang good team as well.
Arkansas is one of the best 2 and 3 teams I've ever seen. They're fun to watch every week. They never win any of their games, but they're fun to watch. They go to Ole Miss tomorrow night. You would think that'll be a tough putt for Arkansas. Ole Miss has a lot of confidence right now.
Yeah, I agree. That Ole Miss Arkansas rivalry is a good one too. It's a fun game. But yeah, you're right. The shine's kind of off Pittman at Arkansas right now. He needs to win some football games.
Is he in trouble?
I mean, I don't think he's secure. Yeah, but I also think, Arkansas's probably realizes kind of like what we're saying with Florida is what good does it do? Like, let's give him another little bit of time.
You read the Gator message boards. If Pittman gets fired, they want him as the O-line coach in Gainesville.
Well, of course they do.
But so will every other SEC
The guy's
team.
an elite O-line coach.
Yeah.
Of course they do.
Yeah. Mississippi State's the only non-conference game tomorrow. They play Western Michigan. No need to discuss that one. All right, the three big ones. Let's begin in the West. Alabama goes to College Station. People forgot about A&M after they lost to Miami early in the year. They're just very quietly at 4-1, 2-0 in the SEC. They host Alabama tomorrow. That's a big one there in College Station.
It is. It's a big one for a lot of reasons. I didn't forget about A&M. I chose not to think about them because they were pushed down my throat for years and weren't any good. So it's like one of those things where you got to show me. And this is a big-time show-me game for Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M. I don't care what Alabama's record is. They're still Alabama. Nick Saban's still on that other sideline. Like, if you want to say, hey, I'm not trying to get fired and get my $85 million, we are a force to be reckoned with Texas and Oklahoma coming into the conference. This is a good way to do it.
In the SEC East tomorrow night, Kentucky's undefeated, Georgia's undefeated, 7 o'clock ESPN. That to me seems like a tough putt for Kentucky, although I was telling Graham this earlier. If the game's in Lexington, you almost use that as a crutch. Because they have to go to Samford under the lights between the hedges, I think Kentucky will be even more locked in than maybe they would be if they were at home. I think Georgia wins the game, Denny, but I think middle of the third, maybe start of the fourth, that game's in doubt tomorrow night.
I think Georgia's getting healthy offensively, and you saw that last week. If you watched the game, they were able to do some things with Lad McConkey, freed Brock Bowers up a little bit. He's getting healthy as well.
They're playing with fire, though, man. Trailing to South Carolina at the half, trailing to Auburn in the third quarter. I don't know if you can keep doing that and keep coming out on top.
Well, I'm sure they don't plan on keep doing that.
Right.
Right, but I think they've opened it up a little bit. Carson's playing really good football. I think kind of what I'm saying with Graham Mertz is they've kind of done with Carson is, okay, you've done well with what we gave you. Now let's give you more. And hopefully as he continues to perform, they'll push more. I think Georgia wins this game pretty convincingly. I don't think that Kentucky is all that great. I think they ran one play and had one guy who was really physical and refused to go down, and Florida let that guy beat the tar out of them.
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine that Georgia is not going to line up 7 dudes in the box and say, bring all the smoke you want, my man, because we're here for it.
Devin Leary hasn't had to do anything for Kentucky, and they're 5-0.
69 yards on Saturday.
Yeah.
He's done nothing, and they're 5-0. Devin Leary at some point is going to have a game. And if that game's tomorrow night, I think Kentucky has a shot at upsetting him. I don't think they will. I think Leary plays well. That's why I think it's a fourth quarter game. But all the talk about Devin Leary and how great he was at NC State, he has had to do basically nothing to get the 5-0 to this point. Eventually, he's going to have a great game.
That's what starts to worry me as a fan, not as somebody who works in the business, but you see these teams, Kentucky is one of them, just like Florida has been the last 2 years, where they have these guys, they're good players, but it always looks the same. I mean, Will Levis, who everybody was saying was the best player in college football last year, and
every time he's on my screen on Saturday is not.
Like you're like, what am I watching? And then you got Devin Leary, and you're like, okay, well they got to open it up. They brought this dude in. He didn't go to Kentucky to hand the ball off. They had to have these conversations, and then dang, you turn it on and it looks the same.
Mm-hmm.
I almost don't know. I think it's just that system, and it's what Stoops allows to happen. And listen, I don't blame them. If you can, they're undefeated. And if you've got a running back that you can just go, okay, we're going to go wide zone, we're going to go inside zone, and it's working, then why would you throw? But I just don't think that's enough for Georgia.
Dare I say the SEC East championship game tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Between Kentucky and Georgia there in Athens. And then that brings us to, it just doesn't get a whole lot bigger than this. SEC Network, 4 o'clock, 2-4 Vandy, 0-2 in the conference, coming in to play the 3-2 Florida Gators at 1-1. Vanderbilt beat Florida last year. I know Anthony Richardson's your guy, and he's doing great in the NFL. Still, one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen in my life was the Hail Mary last year where Anthony Richardson threw it into row G of the stands. to literally end the game with no time remaining.
Yeah, don't worry about the 400 yards before.
No, the 400 yards was great, but I mean the game is over. This is the final play of the game.
Let's look at the Hail Mary.
And he launched it into row G of the stands. That was interesting to me. Having said all that, they can't lose to Vanderbilt 2 years in a row, right? This Vanderbilt team, it's probably not as good as last year.
I don't know that I would use the word can't, but I don't think they will. Yeah.
I think they're going to play really well tomorrow, actually. And then I think the Saturday after that in South Carolina, they're going to lay another egg. It's this vicious cycle they got going.
I think the same thing for tomorrow, which is the reason why I'm so uncomfortable, because every single time that I think that Florida's like, oh yeah, they're going to play well, they don't.
I mean, what's your definition of playing well? They win by 2 touchdowns. They win by 4 touchdowns.
No, they went to Utah, and I convinced myself, okay, here's the situation. And then last week with Kentucky, it's like I'm taking what I saw the weeks before, and the feeling that you get as a fan of, oh, this thing's trending in the right direction, and then they just go dump on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so now it's like, okay, they're mad. It's homecoming, which does that mean anything to football players at this point? I don't think it does. But I mean,
I used to be a big fan of going to Gator Growl. Not so much
Gator
anymore.
Growl's not what it used to be. I mean, I'm pretty recently graduated from Florida. Gator Growl was kind of
well, Gator Growl before you were alive was awesome.
They brought some people.
You had like Jerry Seinfeld and Sinbad.
My dad went to Florida, and he always talked about how insane it was. Florida homecoming is not what it used to be, is the point.
But I guess my bigger point is there's every reason for them to play well. They're obviously a better football team than Vanderbilt, which makes me think.
Do you take them in the points?
What is it?
18.5.
No.
You would take Vandy?
Absolutely. I'm not.
I don't believe
what's the most that Florida can score? What is the most that Florida can score right now?
No, they put 29 on Tennessee. That's probably
about the ceiling.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if this game is in question in the fourth quarter, but I think you could be looking at midway through the third. It's 23-10, something like that. I mean, I don't think this is a boat race. This isn't a woodshed game for me. Well, I think Florida wins by 2 touchdowns.
If you don't lock into a 23-10 game on SEC Network against Vanderbilt.
That's big. But yeah, they just need a win. Because
I agree. No,
they're not going to. Look, I'll go ahead and tell you. I'm not going to pick them to win next week in South Carolina, and I don't know why anybody would. So they need to win this game, or else.
It's not the South Carolina thing for me next week. It's the going on the road thing.
Yeah.
It's at this point they could go on the road and play anybody, and I don't know that I could pick them.
I totally agree.
Well, and South Carolina got obliterated by Florida last year, so there'll be a revenge factor there. And in South Carolina, they're off this week. Yeah, South Carolina's off. So they're sitting back with their feet propped up after that beating last week they got from Tennessee.
No, Spencer's that guy too, man.
So they have a week off to rest for Florida coming in next week.
People slept on Spencer Rattler. I love watching that kid. I don't know him. I don't work with him at all, but dude spins it, man.
Quickly, because we got to wrap up. I know you got to get going. SEC game next year. This year, the final year in the Big 12, the Texas State Fair. That'll be a good one between Texas and OU tomorrow.
Yeah, I will be honest. I haven't watched that game historically. I don't watch a ton of football, right? But I grew up in Louisiana and Arkansas, and that was the old Southwest Conference days. And so, it was Arkansas and all the Texas teams. And that Texas-Oklahoma and Oklahoma-Nebraska and all those rivalries, I love that a little bit of my childhood is coming back into the SEC because now Arkansas is in the SEC, now Texas A&M. The football out there, man, is passionate.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Florida playing at Oklahoma next year. That'll be fun.
But Oklahoma and Texas, and I know this has been said before, but they just belong in the SEC. That is there a better fit?
Yeah. It just makes the best conference in college football even better. Don't even get me started on that. Every time the SEC loses a non-conference game, I get bombarded on social media. The whole "it just means more" thing. You want to know when the SEC won't be the best conference? Is when people don't have to point out non-conference losses.
This has always fascinated me, Hack, and this is probably a different podcast for a different day. I don't understand the conference allegiance. I don't understand it at all.
With the whole SEC thing?
I don't get it. I don't care about anybody outside the team I'm pulling for.
Well, I don't either. I'm not saying
that I necessarily care. I'm telling, when Florida State beat LSU or when BYU beat Arkansas. What do I care about BYU beating Arkansas? And I get people on social media posting the score line to my timeline with it just means more.
Well, when you've won as many natties as what the SEC has, people are going to hate on it.
Anyway, all right.
There are some SEC chants now.
Oh, there are.
Which has always just been a little weird.
Well, that's all Florida can rely on now. We're just part of the conference.
That's true.
We're not going to be at the top of it for a long time. All right, next week, hopefully, we're recapping a Vanderbilt win, looking ahead to South Carolina. We'll see. There's obviously a gigantic difference between 4-2 and 3-3. We'll be back to recap it on Gator Bytes. Georgia Moore Chevrolet, Southeast Orthopedic Specialist. Thank you to those guys bringing it to you every week right here on 1010XL.com and the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page.